Hey, y'all, Dr. Manny. Welcome to Asylum. Okay, so the idea that we're exploring, the concept that we're creating some distinctions within in this conversation is the idea of limiting beliefs. Now, it's hard to, it's challenging. I won't say it's hard because it's fun if you're open for that kind of flexibility and that level of cognitive yoga. But it's challenging to have a conversation about limiting beliefs because we filter reality. We perceive reality through the lens of our beliefs. Our consciousness pulls a concept into working memory, and based off that concept, hey Claire, how are you? Thanks for dropping in. So, our consciousness pulls a concept into working memory, and based off of that concept, hey Mary, how's it going? Thanks for coming by. So, based off of that concept that is in your working memory, you look around and you see reality based off these different salient aspects of the environment that match the nooks and crannies in the concept. So, the easiest example of this would be examples of racist perception or sexist perception. A person that has a set of those beliefs, hey Trish, how are you? When they look around, hey Connie, Dr. Connie, my bad, how are you? So a person is only able to perceive elements of reality that match the schema in their minds because when you're perceiving, reality is discontinuous. So really, what we as humans made up as through narrative as the concept of minutes passing or time passing is really a string of what most of my mentors describe as discontinuous flashes of just atoms appearing here and there, quantum particles appearing here and there. Yet we weave stories around them, and that story floats into your working memory. Good to see you. And as that story hops into your working memory, again, that story has elements that match to the reality. Now, as soon as reality, from the outside in, what happens a lot of times is you're walking through reality and something in the environment is so salient that it spikes retrieval of one of these concepts, one of these memories, one of these ideas from your past, along with the emotions that go with it, along with a set of expectations of what you expect to see around you. Now, this is a very effective system. It's gotten us far, and as people develop a level of expertise, it's been fantastic. But in most cases, some of our original concepts are so broken, and they worked in a caricature type of cartoonish way, and they got you through life, and they got you through conversations with idiots. Hey Donna, how are you? They got you through simple conversations, and probably with a good deal of confidence and bravado. Within certain limited circles, you're able to function effectively with them. And because usually we have, along with a set of limiting beliefs, a lot of us, especially in my audience, because, I mean, I hang out with geeks and doctors and lawyers and people who like to sit around and think for a living. We have often, a lot of us were prodigies and came out the gates so fast and so far and so talented in certain aspects that we were able to kind of have a bit of a halo effect where the beliefs that we had that were less adaptive, less healthy, and probably in some cases toxic to self weren't really the ones that were showcased. And as a matter of fact, they, in a lot of cases, a lot of us were able to be clever enough to answer questions with different beliefs. And the beliefs that we didn't necessarily have, that weren't aligned at our core, we were able to learn the right answers in order to adapt to society, rise. We had that level of social adeptness. Or in a lot of cases, if you didn't understand some concepts, you just stayed away from the tribe of people who were passionate about that. Now, what happens is As you move forward in life and you develop a depth in your concepts, a lot of the concepts that you might have been able to get away with not using, you because in the past, you could compensate in other areas. You hit the parts of life where you either one of two things happens. You either plateau, and you decide this is as far as the universe intended for me to go, or you start facing those limiting beliefs. Now, limiting beliefs come in three flavors. Schema come in three flavors that you really want to think about in this particular case. You have beliefs about yourself, beliefs about others, and beliefs about the universe. The beliefs about others are essentially sort of a reflected, distorted belief about yourself that you're not really fully ready to process. Now, and beliefs about the universe, again, so these are projections of your parents and close culture's understanding of reality. Now, when they become limiting beliefs is when along the way, the same way you accumulated accolades about the things that you're good at and got better and better at those particular things, you likely, hey Devon, how's it going? Thanks for dropping by. At the same time, you likely developed an amount of shame around certain concepts. And really, it might not have been shame that you should have had, but a lot of times we inherit projected shame where the limitations of our parents or the limitations of their parents that were passed down protectively, and this is particularly true when we're dealing with minorities, women, and even folks who are from lower socioeconomic status. You keep in mind that we're coming from a culture where the hard boundaries are pretty hard. A lot of what you're seeing on TV that we're so appalled by is just we're finally seeing that this is what we as humans have been doing to each other. So those kind of hard boundaries, those prejudices or glass ceilings and other things that people were denying before big data, those are in your belief system. They are in the collective belief system. They are the rules that, based on where you were born and raised, you're going to hit up against as you start to do whatever amount of testing. Now, again, as you get to a point where you've had a certain amount of success in your identity group, at some point you're going to find that usually that success is ego-based success. It's success based on a bit of a fear, carrot and stick approach, because society has been rewarding you for these types of beliefs, and you like the carrots enough where you got really good at chasing these carrots. Yet you knew that because of the carrots that you like, there were certain behaviors in the group that you identified with that you just were not allowed to do. They're called norms of exclusion. You do certain things, you get kicked out of that tribe. Now, within that tribe of training, at some point, again, you hit a plateau where other passions start to emerge within you. Other energies is what a lot of people like to say. And those energies, at first, you'll try to push them through the beliefs that you have, because the way an energy emerges in you is it's triggered by the environment. Okay? Something shows up in your environment that you've been taught to see in a different way. Let's say I'll use a race one because it's so easy to understand in our current times. If you were taught to be racist, when you look at black people, you're going to see a certain thing. If you're taught to be classist, when you look at people of what you perceive to be signaling in different social classes, you're automatically going to have a set of beliefs that are going to be pretty strongly projected onto those people so that you perceive that to be the reality outside of your mind. Okay? Now, when you have a set of beliefs that when they are activated by your environment, trigger instant projection and such negative emotions that in order to escape the pain that these ideas are emerging within you, you automatically project them onto others. It's called projecting your shadow. So you instantly, instead of processing that really when you're tuning into a TV and when you're looking around you, etc., any emotions that you have around a certain behavior, around a certain concept, around a certain other person's way of being, is a result of the rules, regulations, and what they call interjected self-talk that you've accumulated over the years. Until you realize that, you understand it as reality. Until you realize that in most conversations you have with people, what you're really doing is having conversations with a set of projections of the patterns of thought that the people you're talking to remind you of. Until you kind of grasp that really you're kind of, most people you meet, you jump to conclusions about the majority of what they're thinking based on what you believe a person in your past who had similar set of character traits, sort of values, core beliefs, even intonations, way of dressing, way of talking, just whatever identity signals. You're projecting those onto those people. Now, those are the true limiting beliefs, especially when you're dealing in business, because usually what ends up happening is as you're projecting onto people, you're projecting a certain element of judgment. By projecting that element of judgment, you're limiting your ability to serve and really attract people in a non-judgmental way, especially in an environment in which you're dealing with people who have discretionary income that they're spending on you by choice. Hey, David, the shadow knows. Oh, the shadow keep popping out, dude. So now going back to the idea, these are different elements down the alley of what these limiting beliefs constrain you from doing. They limit the affordances that you perceive in the environment. You know, opportunities for relationships, opportunities for promotions, opportunities for new habits or new activities. All these things, you're going to look at them and you're instantly going to have this knee-jerk, visceral, limbic, subconscious response that bubbles up. But here's the thing. With your limiting beliefs, when those negative emotions bubble up, remember, you didn't spend the time because these beliefs have triggered this fear in you all the time. You don't spend much time thinking about these ideas. These are the ideas that as soon as they start to pop up, you suppress them. And after a while, you develop a habit of just, a habit of repeated suppression, which is repression of they don't even reach your conscious mind anymore. Not in that form. What happens is the energy of those limiting beliefs results in either you having a reaction without thinking, so you can make the feeling go away, a sort of reaction formation, you become really reactive, or until you specifically sit with and face the emotions around those limiting beliefs, the beliefs that are limiting your thought process, your ability to stay present and conscious because you disconnect when they come into mind and go into autopilot, until you're able to sit with those, often your mind continues to only see in the environment the elements of the reality that you have conscious concepts and neutral emotions around. So the ones that you have limiting beliefs and negative emotions around, you project them onto other people. And that's the concept of how limiting beliefs give away your power. Because essentially, you perceive these rules, first of all, these projected rules, and then people who act outside of those rules, because you feel limited in your ability to compete with them in certain ways of being, and that includes in certain ways of enjoying certain pleasures that are right outside the rules that were culturally imposed on you, those limited beliefs, you value those, you devalue those people, you judge them downwards, you moralize it, as opposed to empathizing with and understanding the difference in perspective. And that's the way in which you limit your ability to assimilate the information that the access to information in the reality around you based off that different perspective. So, because now all this sounds like, okay, what point of view is not going to change reality? Reality is empirically as it is. The truth is that most of our reality is a culturally contrived social reality. These are stories we tell each other, and then again, we pull these stories to mind, and we look for those elements. We value the elements that tell us that we're doing well along the storyline that we picked up, the ones that our parents told us, whether it was a biblical tale, whether it was a tale about an Easter bunny, whether it was a tale about a historically based tale, just whatever stories, so as to keep the uncertainty down, became your lens through which you looked at reality. Whatever characters within that story that you perceived, you jumped into and you took those roles. Your understanding of those roles from childhood and your belief of which aspects of those roles which aspects of behaviors you were not allowed to do that were very unlike that character with which you identified, became the architecture of your limiting beliefs. That became the edge of your consciousness. So hopefully that's not too abstract. The core idea is that you adopt limiting beliefs as a product of identity. Identity was an adaptive mechanism for learning a bunch of tacit knowledge through affiliation with a tribe, affiliation with a group. It's how you download millennia of information so that you can survive super fast. Think of it as like identity as sort of the matrix plug. Now, in order to overcome limiting beliefs, what you end up having to do is develop a curiosity around fear, shame, guilt, those various negative emotions. What the curiosity does is the curiosity opens a doorway, and this is if you happen to have the conceptual depth in another form, in other aspects of your mind, to realize that, hey, there's a possibility that some of this stuff might be different than I'm perceiving it. And when that happens, some of the existing schema in your mind will try to cover that conscious space, that piece of reality that you keep bumping up against. And so this thing called conceptual blending, where you will grab some of the concepts that you have and you will start to stretch them. You try to make them fit the reality you have. And often you hit the point where the curiosity leads you to trust someone. Hey, Alan, as you're trying to solve a specific set of problems, and you end up developing a new paradigm. Now, when you look back, what makes it hard to adapt that new paradigm, though, is limiting beliefs are triggered by the environment. You immediately get this contemptuous identity threat, negative, combative, defensive reactivity. Okay? So it becomes hard for you, in order to overcome those limiting beliefs. The process involves, when the triggers in the environment emerge that result in the fear, the guilt, the anger, these triggered negative emotions, these visceral limbic amygdala-based emotions, you want to stay present with them. And present means take a realistic assessment of the threat as opposed to what your imagination is saying it is. Hey, Dr. V. So by virtue of staying present with it, where you are in your current self-narrative, what you end up doing is, and this is where your prefrontal cortex regulates your amygdala, and your cortisol comes down, etc. Your heart rate variability goes back up. You go into what's called a parasympathetic state, a relaxed state. Your cortisol goes down. Your higher functioning, your higher self comes back online. You can think in terms of your values as opposed to just in terms of raw fear, fight, flight, freeze. So you want to be able to sit with these ideas that are triggered as a sign of your limiting beliefs, as a sign that you've hit the edge of your consciousness as it exists for your identity group, the collective consciousness that you were raised into. Often we call it a tribe of origin. It's the stories you grew up with. So as you become aware of that and you sit with this fear, some of the concepts that you have will shift over, and this is the conceptual blending, where they will start to expand to cover some of the space that where the limiting beliefs used to live. If you're able to recognize and develop some familiarity with the different perspectives that other people have. And this is where the curiosity kicks in, and this is where elements like trust kick in. Essentially, what you do is you end up hearing their story, their metaphor, and developing a depth within that space where you realize that you actually had a deep visceral understanding, a resonance around those ideals all along. It was just that because of the negative emotions around them, you were separating those ideas. You were keeping them compartmentalized. And what that does is that it results in, it's called disintegration. It's like a fragmented hard drive where pieces of your memories are separate. And really what should be happening is those triggering environments, instead of triggering those negative emotions, they should trigger recognition within the past stories and experiences you had that are sitting in your mind already. So this is when you'll often hear that limiting beliefs are associated with old wounds. And when those wounds are activated, you have trapped energy. Okay? Because what ends up happening is those triggers, instead of activating responses in your mind and shortly thereafter in your actions that are adaptive, that are well timed, and that are connected with the environment, and therefore make you feel proficient, make you feel confident, make you feel as if you can trust yourself to come up with the correct and relevant ideas in the context. Instead of activating that set of low energy sort of habit chains, behavior chains, muscle memory, all that, instead of activating all those elements that are really lightweight in your brain and run on basically autopilot under your conscious radar so that you can feel confident, proficient, and you can be present, they hit a roadblock and they start pulling up these toxic negative stories and the associated negative emotions. That's why they're limiting. That's what they say when they mean trapped energy. Because instead of being able to be present, instead of being able to look at the opportunity of the moment, what you're going to be doing is looking at the situation through the lens of one of these disempowering memories. It triggers you into what's called an unresourceful state, where you're in fight, flight, freeze. Instead of thinking proactively, you're thinking reactively. Instead of looking at opportunities, you're looking at scarcity, because you're looking at a situation where you're feeling a threat to your identity. Now, one thing to consider is in terms of combining this to some of the ideas and semantics in marketing, is that the more ego involved a belief is, the harder it is to loosen it as a limiting belief. And this is because ego involvement, the degree to which you've woven these beliefs into your identity narrative, and they are a part of who you are. And that includes if you hate certain people and you know, the them, the they, you've projected all the things about yourself that you're not ready to process onto the they. And along that, with that, your power and your sense of responsibility for those behaviors, you know, because really what happens is, just as an aside, with limiting beliefs, those negative behaviors, you do them when you're angry, by the way. You do them when you're angry, you do them when you're drunk, you do them when you're under the influence of whatever drugs, you do them when you hit a certain level of stress, and then you turn around and you feel bad about yourself, you devalue yourself, you're like, oh, I was beside myself, stress made me do it, whatever else. So essentially, you give away your power by not by instead of having a full loop, what they call a needs satisfaction loop happen, you end up where certain beliefs in your system result in this shortened loop, a loop where you deflect, a loop where you project away your power, a loop where you do what's called introjection, where you learn new incorrect rules. These are all different ways that what should be a simple loop, a feedback loop where you increasingly get connected with the environment and can make these low effort decisions that trigger cascades of automatic scripts. Instead, you become self-conscious, you become afraid, you become rigid, You're doing things from the past that didn't work in the past, are probably not relevant to the context, yet because you're in ego defense mode, all you're hearing, instead of constructive feedback on which you can act, is a threat to identity, criticism, and insulting things about yourself that you don't perceive that you have the ability of changing, because it is in concepts embedded in the part of your mind that when in your part of your memory that when you pull them up, you go into the fight, flight, freeze mode. You go into these negative states. You go into the a state where you're unable to activate the part of your mind that would provide you with an opportunity to make a value-based choice in that context, such that you move closer to your specific set of goals. Now, I know that was like a lot of data, like that was semantically dense as hell, and I apologize for that. But I mean, the beauty of tape is that you can pull that back and listen to it again. Yeah, because ideally, like if I'm seeing the concept, my goal is to like get it described to the best of my ability. If I try to avoid going into the jargon, but a lot of times though, like I'd rather go into jargon than lose an entire idea, right? so so that's the concept of the limiting beliefs. You can spot them by the negative emotions associated with them. Limiting beliefs are not are ego embedded, and as you hit the point where you're trying to move beyond the limitations of identifying with ego, when you're moving to the point of disidentification, such that you're able to see multiple perspectives, such that you're able to develop an empathy for anything from a different group of people. Hey, Adam, how are you? Anything from a different group of people to even an empathy for an object, an empathy for a robot so that you can predict what it's going to do, an empathy for a ball being thrown so you can tell where it's going to land. Any of those elements involves a certain set of calculations that if that part of your brain is not active, you're not going to be able to access. So those are the concepts around limiting beliefs as I'm seeing them right now. I know traditionally you get just a whole bunch of self-help, go, go, go stuff around limiting beliefs. But for me, as one that like, the way my brain works, I have what's called a high need for cognition. It means that if someone's explaining something to me and I smell bullshit, I need to know the details of that particular part that is itching my brain. So I tend to go down specific nested recursive rabbit holes until I'm satisfied that that part makes sense. And with the concept of limiting beliefs, I really needed to know where conceptually in my brain what was going on. And essentially what's happening is instead of being connected to empirical reality, like there are three, I'm going to go down one more rabbit hole because this just came to me now, and so I might as well explain it. There are three sets of neural networks associated with ego states. So these networks affect the way in which you perceive the reality outside. In transactional analysis, they've named them the parent network, the adult network, and the child network. Now, the child network is a lot of memories you made during childhood, some of them possibly wounded, possibly maladapted. Parents did the best they could, but reality did what it did. So the childlike memories tend to, well, be curious, possibly rebellious, possibly a weird imitation of parents. The parent network in your mind, that neural network, in that ego state, it's a more judgmental, it's traditional, its results, based on following and conforming. Its rules, it kept you safe a large part of your life, so it is useful. But the third network, the adult network, is an empirical network. It's the presence. It's here and now, what's in front of us, the real empirical data. Anytime you want to make a decision, you want to make sure that you're making it from a decision where you're projecting into the future. You want to make sure that you're making it from your adult state. When you're having conversations with other people, you signal from your adult state so that they can hear what you expect at a socially acceptable level. And there's all kinds of data about switching states, and feeling stuck within the state. And what that looks like is that neural network is firing off in that person's brain. You look at them and, I mean, they're not in their right mind, so to speak. They're not in the most adaptive frame of mind, in the right ego state to be most functional in a given context. And that ends up the way that ends up showing up is that collaboration is impeded a lot, because what you'll have is one person expecting a certain outcome from another person based off what the other person's quote adult state said. And then in the end, there's a bit of a bait and switch where one of the two people goes into a different mental state and either wants to judge you and blame you for the misinterpretation, or they go into a different state where they want to fulfill simple needs, run off, be carefree, be irresponsible. And by irresponsible, I mean violate a social contract under the guise of not fully understanding it, under the guise of being weak, under the guise of being sick, under the guise of it just being boring and inconvenient, just not stuff that you negotiate initially. Yeah. Where these fit into limiting beliefs, just to contextualize, is when people automatically go into one of those states under stress or being triggered by a pattern in the environment that reminded them from something from their childhood, they end up with basically living on these limiting beliefs, because the beliefs in your parent network are moralizing recaps of the past. And as such, instead of focusing on the desired outcome that you and the other person decided on the adult level, your parent is caught up in moralizing, judging, and is in that often in a critical frame or narrative, often in a conservative wanting to return to prior habits and rituals regardless of efficacy. And again, the childlike state, when you're triggered into that state, you feel helpless. So you become more about protecting yourself. You become more about play. You might become more distractible. In any case, it's a matter of moving away from an adult transaction in which the desired outcome, as stated and negotiated, is what both individuals are synergistically applying their energy to. So when a person cannot go into that adult state, or is triggered by social patterns into either the childlike state or the parent state, remember that's a moralizing state, then the interaction between the two no longer becomes about moving the entire entity forward. So that's the transactional nature of a limiting belief. So I know that went like ridiculously deep, and if you're not one into game theory and transactional analysis, it's a little esoteric, but it's fascinating stuff anyway. I mean, the stuff is so effective in prediction that it's ridiculous. And by prediction, I don't mean in necessarily in all one-to-ones, but as far as large-scale statistical analysis of group dynamics, you're looking at some pretty impressive stuff with predictive analytics. So those are the ideas around limiting beliefs. Again, I decided to go deeper than what you'll usually find elsewhere, because my ideal audience is like more into the nooks and the crannies than the typical, because I get bored with the surface stuff, and I'm not trying to do the rest of my life creating boring content. So step up or get out. Sorry. I mean, this stuff is fascinating, and my passion is to get as deep into it and to help others develop as much of a mastery of this stuff as possible. If you want the small kid seats, I'm sure someone will offer those, but this ain't it. So obviously, I'm always open for feedback. Send me whatever questions you have. Inbox me if you want to dig deeper into these concepts. If you want to step through, I have a program called Cognitive Program Restructuring, where I systematically take you through a set of these different schema so that you can understand how they affect your perception of reality, perception of yourself, and energy, motivation, how they limit what you can accomplish, how they affect your emotional state in different contexts. So if that's something you would like to explore, send me a message in my inbox and we can explore it further and see what we can do with your limiting beliefs and setting you free from them. It's Dr. Manny. I'm out. Thanks for joining me in the asylum.